A future without bolusing for meals. Believe it or not, that future is already here. On today's podcast, I'm joined by two people using a DIY closed-loop algorithm that for one of them keeps her over 80% in range without ever needing to log carbs or manually bolus for food. Seriously, the other user does bolus before meals, and he continues to have over 90% time in range. He says a day at 98% in range, it's not even a special occasion. Whoa. I'm Justin. Welcome to Diabetic Tech. I have type 1 diabetes. On this show, I talk all things diabetes tech, news, and management with educators, tech leaders, and those thriving with diabetes. I spoke with two admins about this experimental DIY automated insulin system. It's an iPhone app called iAPS. The I stands for iPhone and APS is for artificial pancreas system. iAPS may be one of the most powerful algorithms being used to manage type 1 diabetes. While it's controlled by an iPhone, you won't see it on the App Store because you need to build it yourself. My interviewees, Teresa and Magnus, they're working to develop documentation and instructional videos to support the iAPS system, while also managing the Facebook support group, and they're hosting live Loop and Learn sessions. Links to all those are in today's show notes. The two are coming to us live or live taped from the Diabetes Mind D-Data Exchange Conference in San Diego. This is the birthplace of the We Are Not Waiting community. It puts industry professionals, regulatory agencies, and medical professionals in a room with forward-thinking people with diabetes to focus on collaboration for the betterment of the diabetes community. Now, I can keep going on about how cool iAPS is, but the interview speaks for itself. And this is a two-parter. In next week's episode, I interviewed a user on her experience using iAPS over the last few months, so I'm excited for you to hear that as well. New episodes of this podcast release every Monday on YouTube and on all podcast platforms. Be sure to follow. And keep in mind, anything you hear on this podcast or content on my social media and YouTube channel is not medical advice. Always consult with your physician before making changes to your healthcare. iAPS is experimental. It is not approved by the FDA or regulatory authorities. You take full responsibility for building and using iAPS, and you do so at your own risk. Now, a quick word from our sponsor. Today's episode is sponsored by T1D Exchange. You can directly make an impact on diabetes healthcare, treatments, and technology by participating in the T1D Exchange registry. It starts with a simple survey about your life with T1D, and it only takes about 15 minutes. After that, you'll have a personal portal with ongoing T1D study and survey opportunities, from research on technology, daily T1D management, and more. Plus, some of these studies even offer compensation. Signing up with the link in the show notes helps support my channel, and it allows me to continue putting out free content. You can sign up at t1dexchange.org/diabetic or click that link in today's show notes. Now for the episode. Well, hello, you two. This is so exciting for a few reasons. First of all, what we're talking about today, I've probably never been so excited about a podcast recording before. No offense to all of my other guests, but also I have two people on the show. So welcome.
It's so awesome to be here.
So let's let everyone in who's listening and can't see you. Where are you right now?
We are in San Diego, and we're actually at the Diabetes Mind D-Data Conference.
And we're outside.
Yeah, they couldn't find a room, so they went outside. And you know what? There are no helicopters right now, which is great.
No,
and if
don't
they happen,
jinx
we'll
it,
just.
though.
Yeah, there might be.
What's the name of the conference?
It is the Diabetes Mind D-Data Innovation Summit. It's the location where Night Scout was founded, where Tidepool started their Loop FDA journey. It's always been a very small conference, and Amy Tenderich, who is the founder of Diabetes Mind, it's been her, I guess, brainchild. She's been wanting to get industry and DIY tech innovators in the same room for collaboration and advancement of technology in diabetes. And
Wow.
this is the 10th year that she's had this conference. And so many amazing things have come from it. She's amazing. And so that's where we are. We're here because iAPS is one of the demo spots. There are 10 companies demoing their product or app, and we're part of it.
What is iAPS?
Well,
Let's start with the basics.
yeah, let's start there. Well, we need to go a little bit back in time to talk about APS. APS is short for Artificial Pancreas System. And APS has been around for quite a while. Actually, before Loop even. There was something called OpenAPS. And there's something called Android APS, which is like a closed loop system for managing your type 1 diabetes on Android. But some of us prefer, the iPhone. So iAPS is an iPhone implementation of this APS algorithm, which basically makes your CGM and your insulin pump speak.
And so normally we hear hybrid closed loop system. Is iAPS a fully closed loop system?
Well, that depends. Some people have successfully set it up to be a fully closed loop system, but again, depends on your definition of fully closed loop. It only controls your insulin pump, right? So there's no secondary hormone to get your sugars back up if you go low. So, but fully closed loop in the way that it can actually treat your type 1 or help you treat your type 1 without having to enter carbs, without having to bolus for meals. And there's a different success rate here. Some people get it to do a lot for them, and some people get it to do a little bit. But still, it's a lot more closed loop than what you can achieve with iOS Loop, which is what we usually compare it to.
And we're going to get into the way that people are using it, specifically how you both are using it. And I know one of you may be using it in a more closed loop way than the other. Mm-hmm. But first, Teresa, why did you get involved with iAPS?
I've always been looking for a way to have technology meet me where I am instead of me matching what technology needs. So having technology meet my needs instead of me meeting the needs of my technology. And for me personally, that means I want to put as little information into the system and have the best blood sugar outcome as possible. And so I've always been looking for the next best thing that has led me eventually to iAPS. I started on Loop back in the day, 2017. And through my search of finding a better and better algorithm that meets my needs, I have found my way into iAPS.
Can you tell me a little bit, Magnus, about the history? You kind of mentioned it comes from OpenAPS, iAPS, but kind of just where did the iAPS come from?
Well,
how did that come about?
Yeah, iAPS is, we could call it a rebrand, maybe.
Yeah, because it's still the same.
Yeah, it is. It's a rebrand of something called FreeAPS X. I mean, there's so many names and they're so long. So iAPS is a way to call it what it is. It's the iPhone version of the artificial pancreas system. The history goes back to originally a fork of Loop, actually. So there's a lot of history, but I think the important thing to know is that it doesn't really have many similarities with Loop. It works in a different way, but still it's on your iPhone, and it's easy to use. It has a user interface that people can understand. The algorithm part, I mean the math that helps you get the right dosage, it dates back to 2013.
Yeah,
so this has been along for a while.
Yeah, that's crazy, especially because It is a very impressive system, and we're going to get into all of that. But like the fact that it's been around for so long, why did DIY Loop get more attention? Why is that the one that I feel like mainstream people know about? What happened? Especially since I feel like you two and many others may feel like APS is the more superior one. Why did DIY Loop make the cut and rise so high?
DIY Loop or Loop, iOS Loop was the first one that you could get on your iPhone, and it was easy to use. There were not so many settings. It was really easy to get started, and at the time, the APS world was still using devices without a screen.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the original APS was OpenAPS, which was on a Raspberry Pi computer that you had to build. And that is very intimidating to somebody outside of the tech world.
Yeah. So iOS Loop tried to get rid of all of that. And they made an app that's easy to use, easy to set up, and a user interface that everyone can understand. But by doing that, and this is my personal opinion, they took away a lot of the things that made it smart. I've been on Loop and OpenAPS and Android APS. I mean, I've used them all, and the beauty of Loop again is in the user-friendly interface and how easy it is to get started. But you have to keep entering carbs, and you have to keep entering fake carbs when you get it wrong, and you always have to keep chasing it and working, or you have to adapt to the way Loop works instead of having an app that in a way adapts a little bit more to you.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I've been using DIY Loop for, I guess, a year and a half now, and I love it. And I've been able to achieve some very big things that range that people on automated systems that are consumer automated systems can't really achieve or are very difficult to. But I do have to enter in fake carbs sometimes, especially after fatty foods. I find myself doing that. And I've gotten it down to an art form, but it does take time away from the moment or whatever I'm focusing on. So I'm excited to kind of talk about how that may not be the case with iAPS. Real quick, before we move into the algorithm and the technology, which is so important, who is Ivan in Russia? Can you tell me a little bit about his backstory and how he was involved? Because it was interesting when we talked about it.
Yeah, so Ivan is the original creator of FreeAPS, the branch off of Loop. So he took the Loop app, branched it, and created his own version or branch, and it's called FreeAPS. There was some conversation between him and Pete Schwam, and him and Pete went in two different directions, essentially. And at that time, FreeAPS was adopted by Loop and Learn, and Ivan branched and created FreeAPS X. And that is when he integrated the OREF algorithm. At that time, there was we didn't have the Dash integration. We didn't have a lot of the advancements that we have today. And part of what stalled the development of FreeAPS X was the Russia-Ukraine war. So Ivan is in Russia, and when the politics got to where they are, he was unable to communicate outside of Russia. So he could do all the work he wanted to on FreeAPS X, but it couldn't get outside of Russia. So the rest of the world is kind of sitting there with their branch of FreeAPS X, but there's no advancements because it can't be shared.
We don't know all of the details, but no. I've heard that he was cut off from GitHub, which makes it kind of hard to share your code. And communication was
his communication was restricted by no fault of his own. It just is that way. And there was a developer named Pierre that, for his own purposes, for a private repo or repository, I don't want to use the slang where nobody understands the slang. He created his own branch of FreeAPS-X to integrate Dash. In September of last year, he opened that up to public because it was a private branch that he had. And at that time, about 6 months later, he shared that with the now current primary developer, Jan, took over the branch and created iAPS and what we have today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to hear this side of the DIY story. I had Pete Schwam on the show to talk about the origins of DIY Loop. So now I feel like I'm getting, just all of this information of this timeline and this graph, this chart, whatever. And for my listeners, you have to go listen to that episode too. It's a fascinating story. Now let's get into iAPS. First, let's start with the pumps and the CGMs that it works with. What are those?
All right. Let's start with CGMs.
Yes.
Well, if you're using Dexcom, then you're in luck. It supports G5, G6, and G7. And that's what most iAPS users are actually using. It does support the Libre version 2. Libre 2.
Yes.
But is it only the European version?
I believe it's whatever one is compatible with Xtrip.
Yeah, exactly.
So as long as it's compatible with Xtrip, then
it works.
You can use it.
Yeah.
Just with the Libre does it require internet with the Link Up app, or it's doing its own thing through Xtrip?
If you have the Libre 2, it connects directly. If you have the Libre 3, you have to go through the whole Link Up app and Night Scout and back. So it's not a good
Which requires internet connection.
Exactly,
so
which is not a good thing.
Smart.
No.
Yeah.
So Dexcom and Libre version 2 are good to go.
Okay. All right, and pumps.
The same pumps that are compatible with Loop are compatible with iAPS. So Omnipod Dash, Omnipod Eros, with a Riley Link or Orange Link or Emma Link, and the same Medtronic pumps that are compatible with Loop.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go through that list because...
Yeah, no, that's fine. And I think at this point, the mainstream would be Omnipod Dash pods. I think that's what I'm doing it with.
And actually, iAPS and Loop share the same code for connecting to your pump and your CGM. It's the exact same code. So if your equipment works with Loop, it's going to work with iAPS.
Okay. Now, the algorithm, it's very unique. That's the magic. Why is the algorithm so unique?
I don't know if it's unique, but it's definitely different when you compare it to what Loop does, because Loop is carb centric. It starts off with you entering carbs, and then it uses your carb ratio, and it looks at it predicts what your BG is going to be, and then it acts on that. iAPS and the other APS systems, they can use carbs, but they also look at what your BG is actually doing. So they look at how your BG changes. They look at if it's going up or down, and they act based on that. So what it does is that it does a prediction, but it changes that prediction every 5 minutes. Every time you get a new CGM reading, it changes the prediction, not based on whatever carbs that you entered an hour ago, but based on what is actually happening. And it corrects based on that. So it can give you more insulin, or it can cut off your insulin based on your blood sugar, which, at least for me, and I guess for you as well, it makes it react to reality instead of reacting to the carbs that you entered that may as well have been wrong.
It's able to be reactive instead of relying on data or carb entry.
Yeah.
Which could easily be a user error thing. The fact that it's not relying on something that may be user error and it's taking some things into its own hands very much is closer to what we'd expect with the fully closed loop. So that's exciting. Now, let's get into some of these these powerful tools, one of which is dynamic ISF, insulin sensitivity factor. What is dynamic ISF?
Well, it's another adaptation to reality, because if you've been using Loop, you know that your sensitivity is always changing. I mean, it's not a constant, and you might have like a scheduled ISF that you go off, but there's still, I mean, there's slow days and there's days with a lot of activity that change your actual ISF. What the algorithm does is that it looks at how much your sugars change when you get an amount of insulin, and it adjusts the ISF based on that, within boundaries, of course. So there's a lot of settings that you need to tweak in order to get things right, but it can see that you're more resistant and give you more insulin based on that. It can see that you're more sensitive and give you less insulin based on that.
Wow. And then there's also dynamic insulin to carb ratio. What is that doing?
Well, it's doing the same thing. It's looking at what the carbs that you enter. I mean, the dynamic carb ratio only works if you actually enter carbs. And what it does is that it again looks at carb decay and adjusts your carb ratio, trying to mimic what's actually happening instead of just going off your chart.
Yes, so it doesn't go off of your inputted settings. It uses those as a foundation to then adjust up and down based on your blood sugar's reactions to what has been entered.
Yeah. And this happens every 5 minutes. So there's a lot of calculation being done every time there's a new CGM reading.
So currently no other system, consumer system, DIY loop, that aren't this algorithm have these features.
Well,
that aren't this algorithm.
Exactly,
yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
So Android APS does this, and iAPS does this, and OpenAPS does this. The only other DIY looping system that we know of is Loop.
Yeah, I'm not thinking
Okay.
of, there are other systems in development, but in terms of DIY systems, the only other one that I'm aware of are Loop and Loop branches.
Yep.
You had mentioned to me that iAPS uses SMBs, small micro boluses. What exactly are those?
So that is iAPS's way of administering insulin in addition to temporary
basals.
Basals, yes. Sorry, I almost said temporary targets, but that would be not correct. So it is the alternative way to get more insulin up front instead of having to set high temp basals to get a significant amount of insulin, which is historically very long time ago Loop. The only way was adjusting basal rates, and that's how it compensated. Mm-hmm. Whereas SMBs or small microboluses are a more efficient and quicker way of getting you the insulin you need at that time.
Yeah, and what you actually see when you're using the app is that, again, every 5 minutes, every time you get a CGM reading, if you need more insulin, you will get an SMB. You'll get a tiny bolus or a larger bolus, depending on your settings, in order to correct you and get you back into range.
Okay, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe with DIY Loop, there are now small microboluses, and that is almost the intended way for it to be used now?
Yes, there are auto boluses on Loop, is what they're called.
Which is, but it's the same practice, roughly?
It's the same way of delivering insulin through small boluses, but
it's calculated
differently. Yeah.
A quick word from today's sponsor, Omnipod. When I was first diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, one of my biggest fears was wearing an insulin pump and what that would look like. My fears were totally diminished once I started wearing Omnipod. Omnipod is a tubeless insulin pump that can be worn almost anywhere you'd give yourself an injection. What I love most is that I forget I'm wearing it. I never have to worry about disconnecting it for showers or swimming, and when I play kickball or go running, it's super secure. Even better, with Omnipod 5, you get automated insulin delivery by connecting it to a CGM. Omnipod 5 uses CGM trend and value to predict your glucose 60 minutes into the future. and makes adjustments to your insulin delivery. If you want to try out Omnipod 5 yourself, you may be eligible for a trial. To check your eligibility and for full safety information and instructions for use, visit omnipod.com/diabetic or click the link in today's show notes. All right, back to the show. So DIY loopers, we have an Apple Watch app, which I love to use. I can bolus right on there. I can see my sugar levels. There is an iAPS Apple Watch app and a little complication you can have. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're able to do with that app?
Yeah, sure. Just picking it up here. Well, I'm at 7.7, which is perfect because I'm not at your numbers.
I'm 70. So
70, which is...
I don't know. We don't do the math.
No.
That's not the point of this question.
So what can you do? Well, you can see your glucose.
Whoa, wait. You're 70? Like, are you like straight line 70 right now?
I don't know if you can see it.
Okay,
Oh,
we're going to have...
Yeah.
That's something we're going to have to talk about momentarily when I'm asking you more.
She's straight line 70.
Yeah.
Because this is the thing. This is the difference between
Straight
us.
line 70.
You say you're 70 and you just said it so nonchalantly. Me, I say I'm 70 and something's kind of maybe not okay. So just the way you said that took me off guard, and that's why I had to interrupt. Okay, go on. And we're going to get into that.
The Apple Watch iAPS app, it shows you your BG, of course. It shows you a little green circle or a yellow circle or a red circle telling you that the loop cycles are okay or delayed. And it shows you the carbs on board, the insulin on board. It shows you a button to set your temporary target, a button to do a bolus, and a button to enter carbs. And then there's a third or fourth part where you can actually choose what to see. You can choose to see your temporary profile. You can choose to see your steps, your heartbeat. There's some level of customization that you can do.
Mine shows me my current sensitivity factor.
Yeah, so you can basically choose what to see on that third part of the complication. And if you and this is my favorite feature, if you long press in the app, you get a
full screen reading of your levels.
Yeah, and it's your level and the loop circle, nothing else. So no clutter, no extra information whatsoever. This is my night mode, basically.
But that's the app, correct?
Yeah.
Like that's not the screen you're going to see when you just look at your watch. You need to open up the app, and that will be it.
Yes, there's not a complication that is.
There's not a sticky
just a home screen.
Yeah, exactly. And there's several reasons for that. And the main one is that again, Apple. While we love our iPhones and our Apple Watches, Apple has some limitations to what we can do. And this kind of complication cannot update more than every 15 minutes or, 4 times an hour, which is not enough to give an accurate reading. So there's a decision being made that says that, we're not going to do that. We're going to put the iAPS icon as a complication. You can tap that and you get back to the app. And if you configure your watch correctly, then that app will stay open for an hour. So
gotcha. Okay, cool. That's awesome. That's great. One thing I also love about using DIY Loop is the ability to set overrides depending on my activity. So if I'm going to work out in an hour, I turn it on. There's also a pre-meal ability. It will lower the target before meals. Does iAPS have the ability to create these temporary basals and ranges?
Yeah,
targets.
They're called profiles, and it's quite easy to use. You can create your presets, so you can make one for pre-meal or for exercise or for slow days or whatever, and it lets you do a lot of configurations. Like you can just slide a percentage and say I want to go 125% or 75% to change all of your settings. But then you can also go into more settings and say that, for exercise I want to go to 75% of my normal profile. But then I also want to disable SMBs. which makes sense because during a workout, you might not want automatic bolus. You might want to have a slower acting approach to correcting your BT. So there's a lot of configuration within the profiles feature, but luckily there's a preset, so you can save your profiles, give them names, and give them a duration, and they will turn off again automatically.
And you can also differentiate between whether you want it to change both your ISF and carb ratio. Whether you don't want it to, you can turn those off if you just want to change basal with the percentage. You can also change your S&B minutes or unannounced meal limits, the limits that you have on those features. You can have that included in your profile. So there's a lot of customization available in the profile settings for iAPS.
And I think this is a very, there's a difference, a fundamental difference between Loop and iAPS. Loop is designed to be easy and not have too many settings. iAPS has a lot of settings. There's a lot of things that you don't necessarily have to, but you can do. So to a new user, it can look a little bit overwhelming, but when you understand it, oh God, yeah.
It's funny you say that, because as you were saying all of that stuff, I was like, okay, like I understand what you're saying. Some of it's going over my head just a bit, and I'm sure listeners even a bit more for some of them. But I can even attest to DIY Loop. That was, I think any system's going to be overwhelming at first with the options that it provides. But as you use it and practice and get better, it becomes easier. I'm starting to remember all the terms that you're throwing at me and what they do. And the more I, think about them, the more I'll get them down. But also, yeah, there's so many settings. You don't need to rush to like do them all instantly. Just get those get those main ones down and kind of see where things go from there. Now, I know everyone listening is dying to hear more about results, and so am I. As I said earlier, both of you have different approaches, so I kind of want to go from one to the other. Teresa, let's start with you. Prior to getting on this algorithm, you were on DIY Loop.
Yes.
What was that transition like? I know it was so long ago, but what was the difference between what you were doing back then and now? Like, what's been the change on your overall, mental health, but just like lifestyle change? What has this allowed you? What has this opened up? I don't even know what I'm asking. I feel like, how has it changed things for you?
I rarely think about my diabetes on a day-to-day basis now. Whereas before it's a, constant weight on your shoulders, right? Every decision is based on, was it going to do to my blood sugar? Every decision, right? And adding Loop lessened that burden. But over the years, as I've switched and found iAPS, the burden of diabetes has become so minuscule that I can devote my time to helping people with their diabetes instead of having to prioritize my own, instead of having to constantly think about what am I doing, what's coming next, what do I need to do to prepare for this meal or this activity. I really have found a hands-off approach to my diabetes, which has kind of freed me from it in a way. I still have to put on devices and make sure my app's working and those kinds of things, of course, but I don't think about diabetes on a day-to-day basis in terms of how to manage it.
Yeah. Is it true that you don't bolus?
I don't. I don't bolus. I don't announce carbs. I don't do hardly anything at all.
How is that possible?
I wish I had a formula that I could share with everybody. I know Magnus would like that formula if I ever develop it, but it really is just over the years fine-tuning my settings and finding the algorithm that works for me instead of me for it, and being able to give it enough freedom so that it can safely keep me in range without me having to put that information in, while also giving me enough insulin to keep me in range. And the fact that it's reactive instead of focusing on what I've entered into it, like the carb entries, I'm able to do that because I don't have to put the information in. It sees the information as it's coming from my CGM and saying, oh, you're starting to rise at this rate. The algorithm's not expecting it. So it's saying, oh, well, you must have unannounced carbs on board. So I'm going to account for those because of the rise in your blood sugar being so different from what it expects. And it's been life-changing.
And so okay, let's start with, you're not bolusing, you're not announcing meals, which all of us are so used to doing. What's your time and range like?
On a bad day, it's 75% time and range.
Okay.
On a good day, it's around 98% time and range. So it varies between those two in some way. So average about 80.
Okay. I mean, not bad. My range averages out about 80 and I'm announcing meals. So that would be cool to not have to announce meals. Also, what are you eating? Like, can you tell us all like the Cinnabon story? Yeah, I know. Like, I had heard you ate a Cinnabon once. Like, I don't know. Just tell me about that. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm on a high carb diet and like as alternative to low carb. I eat all the carbs. I love cereal. I eat cereal for breakfast. I mean like Fruit Loops, not that low carb stuff. Like I eat the good stuff. And I love carbs. I love Cinnabon. I love pizza. I love like all the things that we're not supposed to eat. Pasta. That's what I eat. And
Wow.
I've fought myself for 25 years of diabetes, trying to eat the things that I'm supposed to. And it's always been a burden. It's always been something that has led me into diabetes distress and diabetes burnout. And because I'm always fighting against myself and always feeling like I'm never going to be able to achieve this, this is something that I'm missing out on so many things because I can't have this anymore. And finally, I just was like, I'm doing it. I'm going to find a system that's going to let me live the life that I want to live and not inhibit me. Here I am. So I don't bolus. I don't count my carbs. I don't enter my carbs. I just eat what I want when I want. And the rare occasion that I do bolus is if I notice that my blood sugar is rising too high, too fast. And I'll say, okay, I probably should interfere and put some, either enter my carbs or bolus. But that is maybe once a week, if that. It's not very often.
Yeah, not at all. And it's important to note, you are on Ozempic. You're using that as a treatment for type 1 also, right?
Yes.
Do you have any idea, like, would that have a direct impact on that, you think, and help the system, I guess?
I think it definitely helps.
Yeah.
I won't say that it is the cure-all, but the way Ozempic works is it slows digestion. And the goal in diabetes management, right, is to match our insulin absorption with our carb absorption. So they perfectly match over. And the limitation that we all have is our insulin is slow. Mm-hmm. It's not as fast as, endogenous insulin. And Ozempic slows the carbs so that the insulin can catch up. So I do think that having Ozempic on board is a factor in my success, but I also can't say that it is a requirement for success.
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, I only use insulin. Well, this is a good day, but this is my day. 98% in range. I don't announce
how often are you getting that 98% range? Does that shock you at all, or it's like, just another day?
That's not shock. That's not a shock for me. I'm usually at 92, 93% in range, and but I do bolus for meals. Just my reaction to carbs is always a rise. So I have to bolus for meals, but I don't count carbs. I don't enter carbs. An extra bolus if I see that my sugars are rising rapidly. But apart from that, I let the unannounced meals feature and the SMB feature account for whatever adjustment is needed. So I pre-bolus. I mean, I was on MDI. I mean, pens, like injections for 25 years or something. So I know intuitively how much to bolus for a meal. So I do that through the app, and I let the algorithm take care of the rest. And 9 out of 10 meals that works fine.
And you're always pre-bolusing, or like how much time do you bolus before meals?
It depends. For me, that depends on how much insulin I have on board, what kind of meal it is. I mean, if I have a Cinnabon, I need to pre-bolus like 20 minutes before. But for a normal lunch or a normal dinner, I bolus when I sit down to eat.
Okay, gotcha. Are most people using iPS getting similar results overall?
A majority of experienced users are. New users, depending on what system they're coming from, can find that it's difficult to transition their mindset based on what kind of system, which determines what features they're struggling with adjusting to.
Yeah, so what we usually see in users coming from Loop is that the first week, their nights are perfect because, the algorithm just takes you to target and keeps you there. But mealtime is kind of difficult. And they need to spend some time adjusting settings, making the algorithm aggressive enough, but not too aggressive, and changing their mindset away from announcing carbs, or at least away from assuming that carb announcement is the main criteria, because it isn't.
Yes, or it's more looking at carb announcement as giving iAPS the future information that it might need if blood sugars start to rise, whereas in Loop, you're giving the carb announcement for it to start acting immediately.
And just to be clear, I mean, if I do enter carbs, because I've tested that, if I do enter carbs, the algorithm does an even better job. So it does help to enter carbs, but it's not. I mean, I'm still in the 90% time range without. So for me, that's a quality of life thing. I don't want to do math based on a plate of. I mean, no, that's not.
Yeah, it's more of a what are we willing to accept as success for our goals in diabetes management? Because I'm willing to accept 80% as a huge win because I don't want to enter carbs. But that 80% might not be the target that Magnus has. So entering or bolusing is a compromise for him to achieve the target that he has. So we're both finding our own success, which is, it's something that you have to determine as an individual with diabetes is what do you find successful? I think only the person with diabetes can determine that. And I think this tool is something that can help everybody that is willing to use it and willing to take that steep learning curve and make it work for them.
Wow. I think one of the hardest things about T1D for me is lingering highs from very fatty foods, pizza, burgers, French fries. Does iAPS do a better job at getting you down sooner from those than other systems?
I'd definitely say yes, if you configure it correctly. You need to give it room to act on your high levels. So there's some configuration that you need to do, and sometimes that conflicts with the configuration that you need for exercising. So there's a conflict here. So I actually have a pizza profile and an exercise profile that are working quite differently in order to get me down when I had pizza and not kill me when I exercise.
And I take a different approach because
You love pizza.
I eat pizza all the time and I eat carbs all the time, right? So I have mindset to accommodate that carb entry or that carb factor. And then I have a profile for exercise.
Yeah, so my pizza profile would be your normal profile.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many people are using iAPS, you think?
We don't know.
We don't know. We have about 1,500 people in the Facebook group. We have, honestly, I can't remember if it was 38 or 58 countries accounted for. There are 277 forks of Loop, of iAPS.
Wow.
So that means 277 people have built it through GitHub, which is the browser build, but it doesn't account for Xcode builds.
Yeah. So basically,
so it's not really a full
okay.
picture.
Yeah. So the thing is, iAPS is not. It's not collecting statistics. It's not calling home to anyone to give any statistics to the developers yet. It will be, but if I had to guess, it's in the hundreds, not the thousands.
Yes.
Oh, it's in the hundreds.
It's in the hundreds, not the thousands.
Or like early thousands.
It may be over 1,000, but it's not multiple thousands.
Exactly.
Wow, this is cutting edge. Okay, cool. Wow, I'm so honored that this is happening right now. This is so cool. Okay, does iAPS remove the need for us to even work on bihormonal pumps? Like, you're achieving 98%. Do I need to have two hormones in my pump, glucagon and insulin, to like you're getting 98% with a sophisticated algorithm? Like, is the bihormonal pump dead?
I wouldn't say that it is, but that's more because I think, and this is a personal opinion, that it's all about finding what work somebody is willing and able to put into something. So for this algorithm, it requires some upfront work where you have to get your settings close enough. You've got to know what all the parameters that you're setting and adjusting, what they actually do and what they mean and how you're influencing the decisions based on what your settings are saying. It takes a lot of upfront knowledge. Whereas a dual hormone system, because it's the islet and based on what has, the current iteration of the islet, right? That's all I can go off of. That requires so much less input for setup from the user that it's probably better for the larger diabetes population to get that level of control with a dual hormone pump. But I also think that having options is the best thing for people with type 1.
And I think when I was on Loop, I was getting unexpected lows. When I'm on iAPS or Android APS, I don't get unexpected lows. I do get lows, of course I do, but never unexpected. I mean, I can always explain them, usually by me doing something wrong. But Loop would shoot me low at any time. No, I wouldn't say that it kills the islet, but for me at least, lows are not. It's not a significant issue anymore.
Do you think the big players are watching? Insulet, Tandem, Medtronic. Do they know about iAPS? Are they why aren't they doing this?
I think if they don't know about iAPS, they will after this conference. I do know that they are all watching the DIY space. That
They know.
A lot of the innovation was done first. Not all of it, but a lot of it was done first in DIY. Remote monitoring, done first in DIY. Many of the features that people with type 1 diabetes want in their closed loop systems or in their pumps. It was done by people with diabetes first, because we know what we want and we're going to do it whether you let us or not.
Exactly, and I think that's the big issue, because you were asking, Justin, why aren't they doing this? And I think it's accountability, liability, all of the things that come into play when you're afraid of being sued for something. Because I can configure my iAPS to give me too much insulin, and I know how to configure it. I know which settings to use because I've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah. But you have to imagine, I mean, the DIY space has been paving the way for so long now. I mean, AID systems, automated systems are the way they are today because of apps like this DIY loop. And you can only imagine that, they are watching, or they know that this is around, and that they are working to get there one day. But it's just also incredible that it exists right now. And I think it's so cool that, I don't know, that I'm at the beginning of this. I hear all about the heyday of DIY loop, and at that time how it just was this like new big thing. I mean, it's just so cool to be even talking to you right now about this. I've never geeked out so much, I think. Now I want you to tell me about the cat.
Oh, the cat.
There's a cat.
I don't know much
apparently,
about the cat, but
so I was on the app. I was on iAPS because I have
Yeah.
iAPS on my phone. It is not currently doing anything other than showing my sugar readings. But I went to change the icon because there's an ability to change the icon, and there was a cat icon wearing an Omnipod. What is that all about? Why is there a cat icon? Yeah, show it to the viewers watching.
Yeah. I mean, there's a very important feature in iAPS that lets you choose your icon, right? It's so important. But there's a cat. And the thing is, there is actually a cat. There's one of the iAPS users has a diabetic cat. And she's put on a Dexcom and an Omnipod Dash, actually using iAPS to keep her cat alive.
Yep. So we have a cat that is using iAPS as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And still alive.
Everyone listening, a cat has it before you. A non-human is using this, and you are not. Wow. That's incredible.
If a cat can do it, then you can do it.
Right? Exactly. Magnus, you had said last time we spoke that there are some growing pains with iAPS now, right? And I guess that is only natural in a space where there are so many people involved with different minds. I mean, that's why there are so many different versions of this algorithm circulating, and everyone's tinkering with theirs. But I obviously, as a whole, many of you want this to be something that is one thing that can ideally do the strongest things possible that you think are right. Kind of take me into that. Where's iAPS right now? And kind of what is it going through with those growing pains?
Yeah. Well, I think there's the fact that there are so many people doing their own thing, making different branches of these DIY systems. I think that's why the development is going as fast as it is. So I think we need that kind of innovation, and it's driven by people who believe that, well, I think this part should be different, and then they just go ahead and change that if they have the skills to write code. And for iAPS, we have there's a stable release of iAPS. It works. It doesn't have any substantial bugs or issues. And then there's a development version where there's a lot trying to make a bolus calculator that's even better. They're trying to clean up some of the old OpenAPS settings that are kind of hard to understand. When there's a lot going on, and I think with all of this being volunteer work, it takes time to develop. It takes time to test. Cooperation between developers in different countries is also kind of hard. Main developer Jan is in Sweden. I'm based in Norway. Now I'm in San Diego. Our iAPS colleagues, Dan is here as well. He's based in Germany. I mean, people, and we all have a job, a life, a family. I mean, things taking up most of our time, and most of us have type 1 as well. So there's a lot going on, and then there's this time that we spend making the app better or trying to educate people and help people use it. And there's not enough time to get everything right. So it's gonna take time, but I still think that if we close this down, or if everyone joins forces, there's going to be too much disagreement and politics to actually get it moving. So I'm a fan of keeping it this way. It's not for everyone. Just be clear on that. For people who enjoy exploring new features, enjoy understanding their type 1 better, it's a great tool.
Yeah. And Teresa, what improvements do you think need to come to iAPS?
I would love to see that the interface be more user-friendly than it currently is set up to be. I don't want to see any of the settings go away, but I would like to see them reorganized so that maybe they don't show up until you're using whatever feature they're required for. So there's, this long list of different settings that are always visible and you can always see them, but some of them are not applicable unless you have dynamic ISF on, or unless you have SMBs on, or, there's so many different features that you can toggle on and off. And one of the ways that I think would be much more helpful and useful for the user is to have only those settings pop up when you actually have it toggled on, because you don't need all of that information. It's very overwhelming, especially for a new user. So something like that, I think, would go a long way, but that also requires time, and I'm not a developer, so I can't go in and just fix it all. Even though I could have this great idea of how to do it, I'm not the one that can actually make those changes. So it all comes down to collaboration and working and communication, and it's a longer process than we would all love to see, since we all are we're not waiting, right? But there does come a time for patience.
Yeah, and you're also working full-time jobs. This isn't a full-time job. I mean, it is a full-time job, but it's no one's full-time job.
It doesn't pay any bills.
Exactly.
At all.
Exactly.
It just costs money.
What you're doing is you're paving the way for the pharmaceutical companies to take it and make a life for themselves, which is great though. That's what we want. That is what we want.
And I think, in
a sense,
it's all open source, and the algorithm OREF has been available for many years as open source, and it's if big pharma wants to use OREF, go ahead, use it. It would be great. It would help so many people. So there's not that wouldn't be an issue at all.
No, yeah, I think the DIY space is one of the most giving groups of people, devoting time to their family and friends, sometimes themselves, working toward this just common goal to make type 1 diabetes easier to live with, and to hopefully, Teresa, get to where you are, where you really don't think about it.
I'm not there.
Yeah,
maybe one day.
But it's so inspiring to hear that you are in a place like that, because that's where I want everyone to be. That's where I want to be one day. So having you on the show to talk about this and see a glimpse at what the future could look like and what already is here, but not for everyone, is just, it's incredible. What should people do? They're listening, they're intrigued. How can they learn more about iAPS?
Well, we have a Facebook group called iAPS. That is a great way to go in, ask questions. You can also go on Discord, which is much less user-friendly, but if you're techie, then you'll feel right at home. You can find the branch on GitHub and download it yourself.
And we've made some videos as well. I mean, we've had some Loop and Learn Zoom recordings that are posted on YouTube as well. So there's places to go to see and listen. We have a video on how to set it up, a video on how to configure it past week 1. And there's an extensive documentation website as well. But I'd probably start with the Facebook page.
Yeah.
Okay. And I also, on that Loop and Learn note, great resource. That's where I was first introduced to both of your stories. Originally, though, I was introduced to you to those videos by Anastasia, this lady on iAPS, who reached out to me on Instagram, and she'll be coming on the show next week to talk all about her experience using iAPS.
Amazing.
Yeah, getting someone else's experience, a little less technical, and just kind of your everyday person using this system. So I'm excited to hear what that sounds like. So thank you, Anastasia, for making all of this happen and putting this in front of me. This was just so amazing. Thank you both so much for coming on. I just can't wait to see what happens with this and learn more about it. And I want to get on it.
You should get on it.
You should.
Yeah. Can you give me a little help? Will you help me a little bit? Okay.
Of course.
Okay. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to document it. But yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yes, it was our pleasure. We're very happy that we were able to hold off the helicopters and be here for this.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us.
Fun fact, Teresa's levels were still 70 milligrams per deciliter or 3.9 millimoles when we finished the recording. It literally stayed the same for the last 45 minutes of that call. Crazy. Thanks for listening to today's podcast. Stay tuned for next week's episode. I've got that iAPS user coming on the show, and she's going to tell me about her experience and what I can expect getting on it, because I'm getting on it. And yeah, I'll be documenting it on social and on YouTube, so stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. To learn more about iAPS, I've thrown links to what we mentioned in the show, the Loop and Learn YouTube channel, where you can learn more about iAPS in those live sessions, and a website link for the iAPS app so you can learn all about it. There's also a link to the T1D registry in the description, and that truly helps me out when you sign up. But not only that, you'll be pushing diabetes research and treatment forward, and sometimes you even get compensated. So thank you. New episodes of this podcast release every Monday wherever you listen and on YouTube. There's links to my YouTube channel and social media pages in today's show notes. I'm Justin, and I'll see you next week.